rising professional. And I thank you for all of you to join this seminar. So I don't want to spend too much time tonight. I just want to congratulate Aaron and the executive, rising professional executive, and hope everyone attending the webinar tonight. In the future, I would like to see you spend more time to support the activities of the ISET rising professionals in the future. So without further ado, I would like to pass back the mic to the speaker tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier Titi Chong, for his sharing. May we have the group photo taking now? Everyone can on your cameras. Still have some participants happen or on the cameras. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smiles. Another one shot. One, two, three, smile. Another one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for everyone on the cameras. Next, let me introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Agugoesi Samuel Ifeanyi. Mr. Agugoesi is from Nigeria. He has a certificate in project management, bachelor degree in quantity surveying, and an MBA graduate in finance and investment. Mr. Agugoesi is also an active professional member of the Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveying and registered quantity surveyor by the Quantity Surveying Registration Board of Nigeria. He has experience in cost control, project financing alternative, total cost management, and contract administration. He has worked in a number of high-profile projects and is presently a senior partner of Ifeanyi and Partners. He will be sharing on effective communication in contract administration. Over to you, Mr. Agugoesi.
It's my pleasure to have everyone present today. Just like I've been introduced, my name is Ifeanyi Agugoesi from Nigeria. Before I begin, I would like to share my screen so that everyone can see exactly what we're going to discuss today. Just give me a few minutes to share my screen. Can my screen be seen, please? Giselle? Hello?
Yes.
We can see your screen.
Yeah, we can see your
Okay.
screen.
Okay. All right. So we are discussing today effective communications in contract management. Well, we will want to look at indeed what communication is all about. We will also want to look at what being effective in communication is. We will also want to see what contract administration means. And then we will look at how communication works in contract administration and how, as rising professionals, we can make a way around it. Firstly, we want to look at what communication is. Now, but before that, let me do an introduction. I'll tell you a story before I begin. That story is something that happened between a drunk and a medical doctor. Here in Nigeria, something usually happens. When you go to the hospital, doctors have the mindset that all the time, before you take certain medication, you will have to eat. So a drunk went to the hospital. Now, when they want to tell you you will eat before you take a medication, sometimes the typical way they say it is they say, put something in your stomach before you eat, before you take this drug. Now, so this drunk went to the hospital, knowing to the doctor that the man was a drunk. So after looking at the man, the doctor made prescriptions of some drugs and then recommended that the man should put something in his stomach before he takes that drug. So this drunk thanked him and left and went home. On his way home, the drunk stopped over at a beer parlor and had enough of beer in his stomach. In himself, he felt, well, this is enough to get me up to take this medication. And the drunk went home. On getting home, he took the drug and after a while, he collapsed. So he was rushed back to the hospital. And then after resuscitating him, the doctor now asked him, please, sir, what did you do? What happened? The man said, I did exactly what you asked me to do. I left and I went to have enough drink to fill my stomach before I took the drug. The doctor, it was at that time the doctor realized that he had not communicated effectively after all to this man. Because if he had said, when you get home, eat before you take this drug, it would have been an easier thing for this man to understand. But he said, when you get home, when you put something in your stomach before you take this drug. And the man felt what he could put in his stomach was a drink, which he did. And at the end of the day, that wasn't what was needed. Now, this brings something to the fore before to us, that communication sometimes, just like Bernard Shaw, as you can see on the screen, Bernard Shaw once said, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So sometimes we communicate, we feel we have communicated, we say something to some person, but at the end of the day, by the reaction we get from the persons, we get to see that indeed we have not communicated after all to the person. Just like a game they call the telephone game. You where a number of persons line up and you whisper to the first person who hears an information, whispers it into the ear of the next person. What happens usually is that by the time maybe the 20th person, the 50th person gets to hear that thing, and the person is asked to say loudly what he or she had, we get to find out that indeed what the person had or what he has said is not exactly what the first speaker had had. That brings out indeed what Bernard Shaw said, that communication sometimes we think it has taken place. The information we think we want to pass through, we would have passed it out, but we're not sure that what has happened is that the person on the other side has gotten exactly what we have communicated to them. So this now brings us to the point where, oh, it is true. It is not just because we have communicated, but we need to find out if indeed the communication has been effective. Now, what makes a communication effective? One may ask. Why? How will you make a communication effective? But first of all, let's look at the various ways we can communicate. Yeah, there are many ways we can communicate. We can communicate verbally. That's the one, just the way I'm talking now. That's a verbal communication. Everyone is hearing. You can speak with people, you talk with persons wherever you go. It's the usual thing that happens. Everyone communicates verbally. That's the normal thing about the communication indeed. But however, we also want to realize that there are non-verbal communications. Communications that take place when we do not speak. We don't get to say anything by our gestures, our contact and via our eyes, our body movements. People read meanings into what we say, and that becomes what non-verbal communication is. So, in other words, without even speaking, we can indeed communicate to people. We also have the written kind of communication where we write. A lot of people write, which is among the most common kind of communication we have. People could write anything and pass to the next person to read, to understand. Then we also have another kind of communication which is not usually present in people's mind, and that is listening. Listening is a kind of communication. Look at it this way. You're talking to someone and the person is not looking at you and is not paying attention to what you're saying. Of course, you will get to know that that person is not understanding what you're saying and is not taking in anything that you are saying. You are not communicating at that point. But when you see someone, the person is paying very much attention to you and is giving you that space. You're looking at him, he's paying attention. You realize he's listening to you. That the signal you get is that indeed you are communicating to the person. You are communicating at that point. So communication can either be verbally, it can be via non-verbal communication, it can be via writing, and then when we listen, when people talk, that also constitutes a way of communication. Now, having seen the various ways that we can communicate, the question we will now ask is, what makes communication effective? And how can we say that the communication is now effective? What makes a communication effective? Now, there are four things that makes communication effective. When the communication is clear, when communication is concise, that is, it is specific to something. When communication is complete, and when communication is correct, it has, if the information in it is right, then we will say that that communication has become effective. When communication lacks clarity, what we're saying, the person we're speaking to doesn't get what we are saying. We're not clear as to the message we want to pass through. A lot of things together. That message, at the end of the day, wouldn't be clear, wouldn't be an effective one. When information we're passing through is not concise, it's not specific to something that we want, this is what the person listening to us is not able to say, this is exactly what we want or what we are getting from this person, then it then means that we are not communicating effectively as well. We also look at when information is not complete. If the information we are passing to people is not a complete one, then that is not an effective communication. And when the information we are passing to others is not correct, there are errors, there are mistakes, there are things that aren't what it should be contained in our information, then that information is not effective. So let's look at it again. Before we can say that the information we have passed on to someone else is an effective communication, that information has to be clear. That information has to be specific. It has to be concise. That information has to be complete. The information is not supposed to be a half-baked kind of information. Just like you see, the thing that happened between the doctor and the drunk. If that doctor had said, eat food before you take this medication, it would have been a complete information. But he had said, take something, and something can be anything. Anybody can put anything in his stomach, and that's something, which the drunk did. So when information we pass is not complete, when information we pass is not correct, the information we are giving out, if it is not correct, then we have lost it. The information is not clear, it's not effective at the time. So indeed, clarity, being concise, being complete, and being correct are things that when put together, every information that is effective must contain these factors. So we want to now look at and ask, when I communicate, am I being effective? Well, we're going to see how this effectiveness in communication, how it affects the administration of contracts as a whole. Now, at this point, it would be nice for us to look at what contract management is all about. We are talking about contract management. Well, a contract basically is when there's an agreement between two persons. It could be between two individuals, it could be between two organizations, it could be between more than one person. There's an agreement to do something. That's a contract. Now, if a contract is in place, then there has to be some effort to see that the contract goes exactly how it should be. It goes in the right way. Everyone lives up to the terms of the contract. If I'm required to do this, if you're required to do this, that we all do that. Now, you see, sometimes contracts, especially when it is in the construction world where we find ourselves, a lot of persons play roles to make contracts work. So each of these persons who find themselves playing a role to make sure that the contract is administered the way it should be, that everyone plays his role within a contract environment, that person is a contract administrator. And so you could have one major contract administrator, and you could have contract administrators in project. But what we're looking at now is that the activities of these persons will constitute contract administration. Now, in a typical contract administration environment, there are some activities we can find. We'll find issues inviting people for tender. So administering a contract could even start from the first place before even the execution of the contract begins. Inviting tender for tenders, processing tenders, and doing things of that nature. Preparing contract documents and its execution, looking at change controls, looking at issues about instructions on variations and prime customs and even defects. We're looking at issues of claims and so many things. We'll talk about chairing meetings, having weekly meetings, putting up reports, following through some procedures of how some reports should be dropped, and issues of certificates and issues of payment and things of that nature. These are things that basically happen within a contract environment. So the people who are meant to administer a contract will be those who make sure that these things take place. The essence of doing these things will be to make sure that this agreement that is reached between these two parties is effectively delivered. If you take a look at these things we have outlined, that are some of the roles that contract administrators play, you will figure out that communication is in the middle of all these activities. It could be communication via verbal way. It could be communication via writing. It could be communication in some other ways. So communication is in the middle of this. And so when we, in the middle of contract administration, on the center, we are not able to make meaningful communications that are effective, then we will find out that a contract could fail. Because where we're not able to talk between each other and get understanding of what we're saying, where I am not able to write and you're able to get the meaning of what I have written, where by the way I behave towards you, we're not able to get together to work, to get each of these functions or activities involved in contract administration, we're not able to do them well, then at that point, that contract is beginning to fail. At that point, one person will begin not to live up to what is expected of him, or the other person will begin not to get exactly what he needs to deliver at that time. So you see, communication, not just communication, but effective communication is in the center of administering contract. Without communication, every contract will fail because there isn't any good way to do it. So now let's look at in detail how communication plays a role in the administering of a contract. Irrespective of what's the type of contract we have signed, what matters is that each person is expected to play a role. If it's, for instance, a construction contract where one party is expected to provide information to the other person to execute the job. Now, if the person who is supposed to provide instructions or information is unable to provide accurate, effective information, understandable information, then the other party will not be able to do what is expected of him to deliver on his part. So you see, the parties involved will have to do their best to communicate, not just communicate, but effectively. They need to make sure that the other person at the other end is getting exactly the information that is being passed. So that it wouldn't be that we, at the end of the day, feel that we have passed up an information and others are not able to follow through with what we think we have said. Imagine where an architect is meant to give instructions to the contractor and the contractor didn't get the instruction, or there is ambiguity in what the architect has said and is able to follow through. Imagine where in a site meeting we're able not to communicate and tell each other, okay, these are the issues of site presently to deal with. If such proper communication does not take place, then it wouldn't be that that contract will come out successful. We'll have a problem. So yes, communication is important when administering a contract. A person could ask, so how can I communicate when in a contract environment? When administering a contract, how can I communicate? What's the best way for me to communicate in such an environment? Well, let's look at the effective ways we can communicate if we find ourselves in a contract administration environment. We're going to look at three kinds of communication that can be within the contract administration environment. The first we want to look at is technical communication. According to the European Association for Technical Communication, they briefly define technical communication as the process of defining, creating, and delivering information on product or services for the safe, efficient, and effective use of product or services. That technical communication is the process of defining, creating, delivering information on a product or services so that the person who is going to use it will use it safely, efficiently, and effectively. If we look back at this, what it means is this: if the technical service or information we give to people does not help them assimilate what we're giving to them, our product or service, effectively, safely, and efficiently, then we have not communicated technically. Now, how do we communicate technically? We all have works that we do. We all have various professions we belong to. We could be quantity surveyors, we could be estate surveyors, we could be land surveyors, we could be architects, we could be anything. We provide services to people, and at the end of the day, we're able to bring out some product. For instance, for quantity surveyors, they bring out maybe a bill of quantity, maybe evaluation, maybe whatever document it is. If it's for an architect, he's producing drawings, specifications, and details for carrying out the work. Now, if the information, just in line with how European Association of Technical Communication defines it, if the information we give to people is not that kind of information that can help them assimilate what we're giving to them safely, what we're giving to them is not helping them to assimilate the information effectively, efficiently, then we have not communicated technically. Let's take it practically. Some time ago, I was involved in a project. Now, the initial cost, estimated contract cost of that project by the time we assumed took over site was about $6.3 million. But as the project went on, at the end of the day, the project ended up with an additional cost of about more than $652,000. If you check that, that's about over 10% of the initial contraction. We know that errors in cost could be between 5 to 10%, depending plus or minus 5%, depending on kind of contract it is. Now, to have that in a contract, you are overshooting by as much as 10% on the contract. What was the problem? We got to find out that the architects on that project, they did not visit the site before they did their design. So they did their design in the air, out of the blue, made their own assumptions and made designs. Now, that wasn't enough problem. When the quantity surveyors were working on the drawings, they saw that there were a whole lot of ambiguities and errors. They did not query the architect to ask what exactly was the problem. They carried on with the information they found, even though they had, ambiguities, things they didn't understand with regards to that. But they continued. And to make the case worse was that the templates they used in preparing that bill of quantity was the template they used in preparing a bill before for another project. So they now used it just because they wanted to meet up with time. They used it to prepare this one and ended up leaving some descriptions and quantities that were meant for the project they did initially and leaving it into this new one. And this whole thing were not properly looked at and they were used to sign a contract. And when we got into that job, it was a whole mess. Now, look at it this way. Has the architect or the quantity surveyor, have they been able to communicate effectively, technically? The answer is no. Because if you look at what constitutes an effective communication, the information has to be complete, it has to be correct, it has to be concise, and it has to be clear. You have joints where you have errors. There are errors in the joints that you're giving out. You have bills of quantities that there are errors. You have evaluation reports that has errors in it. Of course, that is detracting from effective communication because the person who reads that information will become deceived, will be taking in false information, information that is not accurate, information that has error, information that is not complete to make a decision. So if it's to give to a management to make a decision, we have deceived the management because we have not communicated effectively technically. So the information we give out as people, professionals, will have to be information that is clear, information that is concise, correct, and complete. So technically, if we are giving out any information that has error in it, if it is computational error, if it's grammatical error, if it is unprofessionalism displaying itself in the information we're giving out, then that is not an effective communication. And if this finds itself in the environment where project contract is being administered, it's going to be a whole mess up. Now, imagine the contract I was talking about, where we now sit in environment, we began to have a redesign of the site. We began to look at effect, the realities on site in the joints. We have to develop new sets of joints to work with. We have to begin to review bills of quantities. These are things that already had been done, but we're going back to them again because the persons who had communicated technically before did not do that effectively. So technical communication is very important for us as professionals, especially as rising professionals. We need to see to it that the information we give out technically of whatever it is we do is such that it is clear, it is concise, it is complete, and it is correct. In that way, we would have communicated effectively as professionals. Another way we can communicate in the project contract environment is using our soft skills. When we talk about soft skills, we're talking about our interpersonal skills, our ability to speak, our ability to write, our ability to listen. These are our interpersonal skills. And they are very important when we find ourselves in a contract administration environment. So how does this play a role? In a contract, while administering contract, we write, we speak, we hold site meetings, we hold meetings of any sort. We speak to others, we listen to others speak to us. In these ways, we are communicating. Now, let's look at listening, for instance, our listening skill. If we're not listening to each other, maybe in our immediate team or other teams, but where all of us are working in the same, within the same contract environment, we're not listening. We are not this kind of person who has the patience to listen to what the other person is saying or at the time. We're in our mind all the time, we have what we want to do. We're not listening. We're not listening. We will end up messing things up because it's either that people are telling us something important that we're supposed to do, which we will end up not doing, or that we are not paying attention to things that are being said that we need to learn from. So listening is a very important skill within a contract administration environment. We need to develop a listening skill. It is a skill. Not everyone has the patience to listen. Not everyone has that art of listening. We need to learn to listen. It is very important. If we do not listen, we miss it out. Imagine where other people do not listen to us. We get so messed up. We miss it all at the time. Look at again the verbal skill, our ability to speak. At this point, I would like to say that contracts, every contract we sign has language that it speaks. Every contract speaks a language. That language with which that contract was signed is the language of that contract. So it is expected that every person playing a part, consultants, contractors, whoever it is, representatives of the client or the contractor, everyone playing a part in a contract environment should know how to speak the language of the contract. Is it English? Is it Spanish? Is it Chinese? Is it whatever language it is? Because if you're not able to understand that language spoken by that contract, then how are you able to follow through with what is happening there? So we need to ask ourselves, am I able to speak fluently in the language of the contract? Am I able to speak fluently in a way that people listening to me will understand me in the language of the contract? Now, this is not to say that, for instance, if a contract is signed, if a contract is written in English, that if I'm talking to the next person, I cannot talk in any other language. No, that's not what it means. But the thing is, if it has to do with what we are doing as regards that contract, any role of we have to play, anything we have to play that has to do with that contract has to be in that language. If we're reading out what is in that contract, it is in that language that we'll read it out. So we need to have a good understanding. Speak that language in a way that the person listening will understand. That's what we must do if we must effectively communicate within a contract administration environment. It is important. Now, apart from the language, there's something else we need to look at, and that is the way we speak it. Some languages have this thing about having respect. Some languages, in quote, show respect. If you want to talk to, let me use maybe the Chinese language. If I want to say come in Chinese, I could say lai, I could say ko lai. If I want to say, but if I want to say the same to somebody who is older than myself, I will not say lai, or I will not say ko lai. I will say tin ko lai, which means please come. That's to show respect. So some of these intricacies of the language, the structures of the language, are things we also need to take. Why? Because in the contract administration environment, there is also need for respect when we talk. So while talking to someone who is older and you refer to the person in a way that doesn't sound respectful, that tunes the person off completely and he wouldn't want to listen to you in the first place. And so whatever it is we're saying to the person, it's like pouring water on a stone. It's not being effective. The person is not listening. The person is not paying attention because to him, we have tuned him off by the way we have spoken to him. So while knowing the language of the contract, it is also important that we also learn some basics as to how the structure of that contract, of that language, so that we're able to speak it effectively while working in a project environment. This is going to create a good working environment, create peace between the persons working, and understanding is able to achieve between persons working on a contract. Now, we want to talk about the other skill, interpersonal skill, and that is our writing skill. Oh, this is quite important. We're writing specifications, we're writing the contract, we're writing minutes of meetings, we're writing instructions inside, we're writing whatever it is we're doing, we're writing something. And you know, most of the times, writing is very important more than the verbal communication, especially when we want things to be kept. We don't want to make reference to it in the future, or we don't want to get misquoted by what we say. We don't want to get misquoted by the way we handle things, the way we have said things about what we're saying. Nothing is to be mixed up. It is better things are written down so that at the end of the day, one can make reference and say, this is exactly how it is, or this was what we discussed. So writing is a very important skill. We can't just do without it when administering a contract. Everything is basically written down. So if we do not have a good writing skill, there is no way we can make it communicate effectively. Imagine where we are writing and we have written a letter, a correspondence, and the person who is listening to us or who has read what we have written is not able to understand what we have written. We wrote instructions, the instructions do not make meaning to the person who is reading it. We write minutes of a meeting, the person who is reading the minutes is not able to make any meaning out of the minutes we've written. We just write and people are not able to understand what we've written. You see, looking at what effective communication means, effective communication, it has to be clear, it has to be correct. When there is no clarity, because we're not able to write well, then there is no communication that's taking place. That can frustrate an entire contract. That can frustrate an entire project. So our being able to develop this interpersonal skill called writing skill is a very serious one. All of us need to learn how to write. If we do not know how to write, it is a problem. We cannot be part of those who are making a contract work out. So you see, three things we have discussed. The two things we have discussed so far. We have discussed technical communication. We have discussed the soft skill communication, which entails listening, verbal skills, and writing skills. There is one more means of communication, and that's the one I will call attitudinal or body language communication. One could ask, how can my facial expressions, gestures, posture, tone of voice play a powerful role in my communication within a contract environment? The answer is yes, it does play. Imagine that people perceive you as being a proud person because of the way you move. I'll tell you a story of what happened in the South. Now, you see, a man, an architect, he was on his project. So he had this attitude that he was the main person, he was the chief person in the project. And so every other artisan working under him, he was their boss, as it were. He didn't create a room for kind of interaction with these people. Now, the reality of the situation was that the architect didn't know much practically. He only knew the theory of what things happen on site. It was these artisans that were actually doing the writing. And these artisans were covering his back because they understood he didn't know what to do. So one day they planned that they were going to hit it against him. When he came to site, they told him that they will not work until he tells them exactly what to do, and he comes to show them how they will do it. Now, this architect did not know how to do those things. These artisans were the ones who knew it. But now, because of his courage, they perceived he was an arrogant person. So they told him they were not going to work. And that day they didn't work. At the end of the day, when the owner of the project and the client came, nothing had been done that day. And he asked the artisans, they said the architect didn't give them anything to do. He didn't tell them what to do. And that was a whole mess for him. That taught him a lesson about his body language when he was working with people on a project. Yes, the way we carry ourselves, people do not like proud people. And when they perceive you being proud within a project environment or a team, they don't want to have anything to do with you because of that personality of yours. Imagine when a person perceives that someone is a liar. So there's nothing he says that makes sense. People will always perceive that he's not telling the truth. Imagine that by the way we behave, people perceive that we are not confident. There is nothing we will tell them with regards to what to do, technicality, that they will listen because they will think we are not confident, we're not sure of what we're doing. And each of these we can sell out by our facial expressions, our gestures, our postures, our tone of voice, the way even we carry ourselves and move around. That can sell that message. We'll be communicating to people, even without talking, even without saying a single word, even without writing anything. We will be communicating to people wrongly or rightly. Imagine where you are telling somebody something, the person is saying, okay, that's true. And the person is sleeping or behaving like he's sleeping or he's not paying attention, he's facing the ground. Already you know the person doesn't believe what you're saying, even though in his voice he's saying yes, yes, yes. But the person is seeing that in you. And you know, this body language communication, it's not something you don't plan it. It's something that comes natural. So people are more inclined to pay attention to that communication than the one you're saying with your mouth, because you could be saying something different from what you have in mind. So we need to pay attention to our attitudinal or body language communication. It is very important when we work with others. When we do not communicate this effectively with people within a contract environment, administration environment, then we will be frustrating that contract. People will not be able to live up to what it is they plan to do and what is expected of them. So as professionals, rising professionals, we must learn to communicate effectively technically. We must learn to communicate effectively via our soft skills, our listening skills, our verbal skills, our writing skills. And it is nice we learn how to carry our body language so that it does not communicate something different from what we have in mind. These are very important means of communication. In fact, it is in the middle of administering a contract. When we fail in these way of communication, then we have completely failed in the entire contract. Having listened to all this, what is our call as rising professionals? What is our call as those who are rising professionals around the world? As young professionals, it is important for us to pay attention to how we communicate. Today, we are juniors, looking up to seniors to learn from them. But you see, tomorrow, they say, belongs to the young person. And that means that tomorrow we will become the seniors and the seniors will be gone. It is how well we're able to prepare ourselves today that will help us to become efficient and effective seniors of tomorrow. If we're not able to train ourselves now, if we're not able to get our skills now in place and prepare ourselves for tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to function effectively when we become seniors tomorrow. That thing they say, the future belongs to the young person. We would have failed. We wouldn't be taking over that future because at that time, we have not prepared to take over the future that is coming. So it is a call for all of us to pay attention to ourselves. Our ability to communicate is very important in various ways. If we fail to effectively communicate as young persons and we do not get to improve on it, we will fail to communicate as seniors and older persons in the industry. How will we be able to train those who are coming behind us if we are not able to give out effective information to others? How will we be able to stand what is coming tomorrow professionally? How will we be able to carry on with industry tomorrow if we are not that person today who is effective in regards to communication? If we're not able to make that good communication, then we have failed as those who will take over in the future. So the question now we need to answer is, what language are you working with? Can you speak that language fluently? Can you write that language fluently? If your answer is yes, you are doing well. But if your answer is no, or you are not sure, then this is the time to pay attention to that part of your professional life. This is the time for us to pay attention, to take a mastery over our communication skills. What about our ability to give out correct technical information? Your profession, the work you do, the reason why you are employed working somewhere, that thing you do as your technical, you have a technical competence. Are you really competent in it? The work you do you display professionalism in it? Are you able, do people bank on the information you give to them? The information you give to people, is it such that they are not deceived or misinformed? If our answer is that we are doing positive, then we are doing well. But if our answer is no, or that we are not sure, then there is a need for us to make efforts now. Tomorrow holds out so much for us as young professionals, but today is the day that we will secure that tomorrow. It is important. We need to make all effort to secure our tomorrow today, because if we do not do that, then we have failed. In conclusion, all of us slept and woke up into 2020 to embrace what we now call the new way of life. In fact, it is called the new normal. We don't have close physical contact with others. In a lot of countries, the number of persons who find themselves in a contract environment is limited because of COVID-19. We didn't plan for this. Now, our activities and physical presence on the construction project is now limited. Our communication is most of the time from a distance right now. A lot of meetings are held via Zoom, online meetings. People do not get to meet each other, they speak from a distance. Even just the way we're having this forum, normally it would have been a forum that we would have held in a physical place and see ourselves physically. But now we're doing it via Zoom. This is the kind of thing. Now, if we are not able to communicate properly, especially when we're involved in administering a contract, if we're not able to communicate verbally, via writing, or whatever means it is, we will be failing at this time. Because when we are not even seeing the person you're speaking to, if we do not take a mastery of our ability to communicate effectively, then this time will be failing us. We will be failing in our effectiveness in carrying out the project. So we must communicate effectively as the only option we have. Yes, effective communication is just the best and only option we have right now. May we, as we are living out from here, let us take something back, and that is this, that our ability to communicate effectively is a very important thing. It does not have a second option. It is just that way. Without it, then there is nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agugoesi, for his sharing. I hope all of us have learned and can apply some of these tips in the contract administration. Effective communication leads to understanding. That is very important. So now we come to the Q&A section. Hi, Mr. Agugoesi. Thank you for your sharing. We learned that the effective communication is to have 4 C's, which is clear, concise, complete, and correct. Can you share with us, in your experience, how can we improve the 4 C's in terms of technical communication, such as drawing? As the nature of construction industry, it tends to have variation changes along the way, and many construction drawings are being issued throughout.
Okay, now I will assume that, now let me take it from this angle. Let me take from the person who does the design firstly, who is the architect. The onus is on the architect to make sure that the situation, because designs are not created on the moon, they are created based on some realities of science. Now, if we're not sure of the conditions that are the real conditions on site where we were designing for, we need to make efforts to get information. We need to find out what the true situation is. There are reports, physical environment reports, there are environmental assessment reports, there are soil test reports. These are reports. An architect needs to get some of these information to be able to do a design that is okay. Now, when he does that design, he wants to make sure that it is something they call it's the designs are what the workability and buildability of such designs are in place. Now, for those who will work with it, maybe quantity surveyors, for instance, or maybe mechanical electrical engineers, you pick up a drawing and in the line of your work, you figure out that there are things you do not understand. There are things that are not very clear. Now, to be able to communicate effectively to the person who is going to be the person who will need that product of yours at the end of the day, you need to query whoever has done the design. Querying here, it's not a negative thing. It's a positive thing. It's a way of getting more information. So you're asking, please clarify me on this. Please clarify me on this. Please clarify me on this. It is when you get this kind of information, you will be able to dish out an information that is technically accurate in the industry. So indeed, there is actually no reason why there is no excuse per se, why we will give out information that are not concise, that are not clear, that are not complete, that are not correct to anyone. Asking questions is important. In some instances, if it is that we do not it is that by virtue of our own knowledge, we are not able to understand what the person is saying, then we need to go meet someone who is senior to us, someone who has a better knowledge and ask some questions. I had a project, I am presently working on a road project. Now, I got to a point on this road project, I was having some issues of understanding with regards to something. I had to run to an engineer, a civil engineer who measures in road, and I got him clear me on those issues. He clarified a lot of things for me, and I had to continue with it. The reason is, if I should just continue working and make assumptions on that, I will end up at the end of the day not being able to give out effective information. Now, we have instances where the people who do designs are not able to give out complete designs. before maybe a quantity surveyor or somebody is asked to work with these designs to give a cost information. Now, the onus is on you to ask that you be giving such information to help you. But sometimes we find ourselves again where these informations we are told are not available. If you are making assumptions to work on something, it is very important you state your assumption at the end of the day, so that the person who is reading what you have done will read it in tandem with the information you have given, the assumptions you have made. So that will influence the person's understanding so that you can be on the same page with the person. We don't just make assumptions out of the moon and we expect that the person who is reading what we have or who is going to receive the cost document or whatever document is going to understand without being able to explain what we have. So indeed, there are a lot of ways we can help to make our information effective. Be concise, we can make it clear, we can make it complete, and make it correct at the end of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Agugoesi. There is another question. So may I know that what is advice can you give to young professionals starting to prosper in the industry on how to effectively communicate with different stakeholders?
Right, my advice is this: develop yourself first. Develop your own skills. Whatever it is that is your profession, develop yourself in this line. Some persons believe that they have just done a little, they can just go and they are done. No, take time. Even when you have started working, make out more time to learn. There's always a time to sow and there's always a time to reap. When we make efforts to learn, put value to yourself. Value earning does not stop. And it is the value you put on yourself that is going to make the other person who is speaking to you to speak to you in a way that is equal to your level or status. So we want to be those who give out information, who take information into ourselves. You learn at all times. And that is the way you're going to make it in the industry. If you don't learn, if you don't have knowledge, there is nothing that can be done for you. It is by the time you're learning, then you can have those who will assist you as you're learning. You have a knowledge base as your foundation. Then you can begin to build on what you have learned. Learning is the first thing you have to do in this industry. Because no matter the height you have grown, you will continue to learn. Oh yes, every one of us will continue to learn each day as professionals. Especially as those who are rising, we will continue to consult to learn every day as the key thing we do at this time. So our communication skill will keep developing as we keep learning.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Is there any questions from the ground? One last time. You can raise your hand and we will unmute you. Then you can speak up your question. Okay. Since that there is a new participant join in, so can we on the camera again? Then we take our last photo before we adjourn the webinar. There's still some participant yet to on the camera. Can you on the camera, please? Okay, we will take 3 shots of the photos. So be ready. 1, 2, 3. Smiles. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Smiles. And the last one. 1, 2, 3. Smiles. Okay, thank you for today to join this webinar.
Thank you so much.
We have now come to the end
Thank
of today's
you.
webinar. I hope it has been a fruitful and informative session. Thank you everyone for the participating. Thank you.
Thank you
for
too.
organizing.
Thank you for organization.
Thank you. We look forward for more.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope we'll have the slides.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we will email to you all after the section.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That's fine.
Is
Thank you
the
very much.
certificate included?
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.